When the wedding invitations went out, my heart swelled with pride. My son, Ethan, was finally marrying the love of his life, Clara. I had imagined this day since the moment I held him in my arms for the first time, his little fingers gripping mine, his wide eyes already full of quiet determination. But as the big day approached, that warm pride began to twist into something I couldn't quite name. It began with a simple conversation over coffee. "Mom," Ethan said one morning, gently stirring his cup as if the way he moved the spoon could soften his words. "Clara was wondering, maybe it's better if you don't give a speech at the wedding." I looked up, certain I'd misheard him. "You mean not speak at all?" He sighed. "She just thinks the program is already long and she doesn't want too many people talking. You understand, right?" I smiled, though my heart gave a small, quiet ache. "Of course," I said softly. "It's her day." But the truth? It stung. Not because I needed to be the center of attention, but because I'd spent years imagining what I'd say when the moment came to thank him for being my son, to welcome her as my daughter, to share something from a mother's heart that could only be said once. And now, that chance was gone. Still, I didn't argue. I didn't let my disappointment show. If there's one thing motherhood teaches you, it's how to love silently, even when your voice is taken from you. The next few weeks passed in a blur of wedding preparations. Every time Clara stopped by, she was polite, almost too polite. "Thank you for the cookies, Mrs. Turner," she'd say with a practiced smile. Never mom, never warmth. I tried not to take it personally. I told myself she was nervous, focused, trying to make everything perfect. But deep down, I knew. She didn't want me there as Ethan's mother, just as a quiet observer, someone to fill a seat and nothing more. And yet, I refused to let bitterness creep in. Instead, I poured my heart into something I'd started working on months before a wedding gift I hadn't yet revealed to anyone. It wasn't expensive or grand, but it carried pieces of Ethan's childhood, stitched together with memories that words could never replace. In my sewing room, the soft hum of the machine filled the air as I worked late into the night. I was making a quilt, each square telling a part of his story. One patch was from his favorite blue blanket as a child, frayed at the edges but still soft. Another came from the shirt he wore the day he graduated high school, and another from a dress I wore the day I took him to his first job interview. But the centerpiece, oh, that was special. I embroidered it myself. It read, "For every word I wasn't allowed to say, may this speak for me." By the time the wedding day arrived, I had wrapped the quilt in white paper and tied it with a golden ribbon. As I got ready, I caught my reflection in the adhere, mirror gray strands escaping my bun, soft lines tracing the years around my eyes. I smiled at the woman looking back, quiet, steady, still full of love. The ceremony was beautiful. Clara walked down the aisle glowing, her gown shimmering like sunlight on water. Ethan looked at her as though the world had stopped spinning. And as I watched them say their vows, my chest tightened with a bittersweet ache. When the reception began, laughter filled the hall. Glasses clinked, the band played softly, and one by one, people stood to speak. Clara's father gave a heartfelt toast. Her mother read a poem. Even her best friend shared a few funny stories. I sat quietly at my table, clapping, smiling, pretending my hands weren't trembling under the tablecloth. Ethan caught my eye once across the room. He smiled, just a small one, but in that moment, I saw the little boy he once was. And suddenly, I wasn't sad anymore. I knew what I had to do. When the time came for the gifts, I stood up and approached the couple. The crowd hushed a little, curious. Clara looked surprised, her brows knitting slightly. "This," I said gently, placing the box before them, "is something I made with love." She hesitated, but took it, carefully unwrapping the paper. When she unfolded the quilt, the room went still. Gasps rippled through the guests as they realized what it was. Clara traced the stitching with her fingertips, her expression softening as she read the embroidered words at the center. Ethan's eyes glistened. "Mom," he whispered, voice breaking, "this is beautiful." For a moment, Clara looked at me, really looked at me, and something changed. Maybe she finally saw me. not as someone intruding on her day, but as the woman who had loved Ethan first. I didn't need a speech. The quilt said everything my heart ever wanted to say. As the music resumed and people gathered around to admire it, I sat back down, feeling lighter than I had in months. Sometimes silence, when filled with love, can speak louder than any words. After the applause faded and the chatter resumed, I found myself sitting quietly at the edge of the celebration, my heart both full and aching. I hadn't expected the reaction, the sudden hush, the glimmer of tears in Ethan's eyes, or the soft tremor in Clara's voice when she whispered, "It's perfect." I thought that would be the end of it. I had said my piece through the gift, and I was content to let the night go on. But life, it seems, has a way of turning silence into conversation. Later that evening, as the guests began to dance, Clara approached me. She stood there for a moment, her fingers nervously twisting the corner of her dress. "Mrs. Turner," she began, her voice uncertain. "May I sit with you?" "Of course," I said, sliding my chair slightly aside. She sat down, looking at the quilt, still draped over a chair nearby. "I didn't know you were making that," she said softly. I smiled. "Some things are better kept a surprise." She was quiet for a long moment before sighing. "I owe you an apology." I turned to her, surprised. "I didn't want you to speak at the wedding," she said, her eyes downcast. "Not because I didn't care what you'd say, but because I was afraid. Afraid you'd make me emotional or that you'd talk about Ethan's childhood and I'd feel like an outsider." Her honesty stunned me, not because it hurt, but because I understood. "I suppose I thought if I could control every detail," she continued, "I could keep the day perfect. But when you gave us that quilt," her voice broke, "it made me realize that perfection doesn't mean control, it means love." I reached out, gently resting my hand over hers. "Clara," I said quietly, "when I first met you, I knew you loved my son. That's all I ever wanted, for him to find someone who sees him, who holds him when I no longer can. But love isn't always tidy. It's stitched together, like that quilt, sometimes uneven, sometimes imperfect, but still whole." She blinked rapidly, her eyes shimmering. "You really meant it, didn't you? That line in the center?" "For every word I wasn't allowed to say?" I smiled. "Yes, because words can be forgotten, but love, real love, can be touched, seen, held." For a long while, we just sat there in the soft hum of music and laughter, two women bound by the same man in different ways. The air between us, once thick with unspoken tension, now felt lighter. Eventually, Ethan joined us, his tie loosened and his eyes warm. "What are my two favorite women talking about?" he asked, sliding an arm around Clara's shoulder. I chuckled softly. "Just old memories and new beginnings." He grinned. "I think that's a good combination." When they returned to the dance floor, I watched as Clara leaned her head against his chest, her hand brushing over his heart. For the first time, I saw not the distance between us, but the bridge being built. As the night wore on, guests began to leave, carrying laughter and leftover slices of cake with them. I gathered my things slowly, still admiring the faint shimmer of the fairy lights above. When I turned, I saw Clara approaching again, this time, holding something behind her back. "I wanted to give you something," she said shyly. "It's nothing much." She handed me a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate gold bracelet with one word engraved in soft cursive: family. I looked up, tears stinging my eyes. "Clara." "I know I can't undo the way I made you feel," she said, voice trembling. "But I want you to know you're not just Ethan's mother. You're part of our family now. I should have told you that long before today." I pulled her into a hug, the kind that mothers give when words are too small. "Thank you," I whispered. "You already are my daughter." Later, as I walked out of the hall under the cool night sky, I glanced back one last time. Inside, I saw Ethan and Clara slow dancing, wrapped in the glow of soft light and quiet joy. My heart felt full, not because I'd been heard, but because I'd been understood. The next morning, I found the quilt carefully folded on the living room sofa. Ethan and Clara had dropped by early before their honeymoon, A note was tucked on top. We'll treasure this forever. Thank you for loving us the way you do. Clara and Ethan. I pressed the note to my chest, smiling through the quiet ache of love and time. Motherhood doesn't end when your children marry, it simply changes shape. It becomes less about guidance and more about grace, less about speaking and more about letting love fill the silence. And as I folded the quilt again, I realized something profound. Sometimes being silent isn't the absence of a voice, it's the presence of understanding. That night, I sat by my window with a cup of tea, watching the stars above. One of them flickered brighter than the rest, and I thought of Ethan as a child again, curious, gentle, full of dreams. And now, a man standing on his own, loved and happy. My heart whispered the words I never got to say in front of the crowd. May your love be stitched with patience, your days with laughter, and your nights with peace. And may you always know you were loved before you were even born. As I set down my cup, a breeze fluttered through the curtains, light and soft. It carried no sound, but somehow it felt like an answer.